War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, Volume 1, Part 1, Chapter 2. Anna Pavlovna's drawing room was steadily filling up. All the important people in St. Petersburg society was there, varying enormously in age and character for all their shared social background. Prince Vasili's daughter, the beautiful Helena, had just arrived to take him on the ambassador's reception. She was wearing a ball gown enhanced by a maid of honor's monogram. The young Princess Bolkonsky, a slip of a girl known as the most seductive woman in Petersburg, was there too, married the previous winter. She no longer appeared at large occasions because she was pregnant, but she did still attend small soirees. Prince Vasili's son, Prince Hippolyte, arrived with Prince Motama and introduced him. Also present were the Abbé Morio and many other people. Anna Pavlovna was welcoming her guests as they arrived with, "Have you met my aunt?" or "I don't think you know my aunt," before steering them with great solemnity towards a little old lady with big bows in her hair, who had come sailing in from the next room as soon as the guests had begun to arrive. Anna Pavlovna would announce them by name, slowly transferring her gaze from guest to aunt, and then move on. All the guests went through the motions of greeting this aunt, who was unknown, uninteresting, and unneeded by anyone. Anna Pavlovna observed their greetings with sadness and solemn sympathy, a picture of silent approval. The lady known as my aunt spoke in the same way to every new arrival, commenting on their health, her own health, and the health of Her Majesty, who was by now, thank God, feeling better. All those who approached were polite enough to refrain from showing undue haste, but once this erroneous duty had been fulfilled, they walked away from the old lady with a sense of relief, and never went near her again all evening. Young Princess Bolkonsky had brought some work with her in a gold-embroidered velvet bag. Her pretty little upper lip, slightly shadowed with down, barely covered her teeth, but that made it all the prettier when it rose up, and lovelier still when it curled down to meet the lower lip. As tends to happen with the best-looking women, a defect, in this case a short lip and a half-open mouth, come out as a distinctive and beautiful feature. Everyone enjoyed the sight of this pretty little mother-to-be, brimming with health and vitality, and making light of her occasion. After a few minutes in her company, and the exchange of a word or two, old men and bored, morose young men felt as if they themselves were becoming like her. Anyone who talked to her, watching her as every word she spoke revealed that bright little smile and the constant gleam of those dazzling white teeth, walked away feeling full of bonhomie. Everybody did. The little princess waddled slightly as she tripped rapidly around the table, holding her tiny work-bag. Then she cheerfully smoothed down her dress and sat on a sofa near the silver samovar. Everything she did seemed like a treat for herself and everyone around her. "I've brought my work," she said in French, opening her reticule and addressing all the company. "But listen, Annette, you must stop playing tricks on me," she said, turning to the hostess. "You wrote and said it was only a little party. Just look what I've got on." And she spread her arms wide to display an elegant gray dress, decorated with lace and set off by a broad sash just below the bosom. "Don't worry, Lise, you'll always be the prettiest," answered Anna Pavlovna. "Did you know my husband is deserting me?" she said to a general, continuing to speak French, and using just the same tone. "He's going off to get himself killed. Do tell me what this awful war is all about," she asked of Prince Vasili, but before he could answer she had moved on to his daughter, the beautiful Helena. "Isn't she a gorgeous creature, this little princess?" said Prince Vasili to Anna Pavlovna. Shortly after the little princess's arrival, in walked a big, generously proportioned young man with close-cropped hair and spectacles, wearing the last word in light-colored breeches and a tan coat with a jabot. The stout young man was the illegitimate son of a celebrated grandee from Catherine's age, old Count Bezikov, who was now on his deathbed in Moscow. He had not yet entered any branch of the service, having only just returned from abroad, where he had been completing his education. This was his first appearance in society. Anna Pavlovna welcomed him with the kind of bow she reserved for the lowest persons in the hierarchy of her drawing-room. But even as she bestowed her meanest welcome on this new arrival, Anna Pavlovna's face was transformed. She looked ill at ease and full of alarm, like someone who had come across some gross object, oversized and out of place. By a small margin, Pierre was indeed the largest man in the room, but her look of dismay must surely have derived from the man's special look, intelligent, rather diffident, but also piercing and spontaneous, that made him a distinctive figure in the drawing-room. "It is most kind of you, Monsieur Pierre, to come see a poor sick woman," said Anna Pavlovna, looking anxiously across at her aunt as she steered him in her direction. Pierre mumbled something unintelligible, and continued to stare around the room, looking for something. He beamed with pleasure, bowed to the little princess as if she was a close friend of his, and then went over to the aunt. Anna Pavlovna's worst fears were confirmed when Pierre walked off without hearing the full story of Her Majesty's health. Rattled, Anna Pavlovna detained him with a question. "You don't know the Abbé Morio, do you? Such an interesting man." "Yes, I've heard about him, and his scheme for everlasting peace. All very interesting, but not really feasible." "Don't you think so?" asked Anna Pavlovna, for the sake of saying something before getting back to her duties as a hostess. But Pierre now committed the opposite kind of faux pas. Fresh from walking away without listening properly to a lady who was speaking to him, he now talked on and detained a lady who needed to get away from him. With his head lowered and his great legs thrust wide apart, he set about explaining to Anna Pavlovna why he thought the Abbé's scheme was a silly fancy. "Could we talk about this later on?" smiled Anna Pavlovna. Detaching herself from this young man, who had no idea how to conduct himself, she resumed her duties as a hostess, watching and listening carefully, ready to render assistance at any point where the conversation was beginning to flag. Just as the foreman of a spinning mill settles the workers down and then strolls about the place on a lookout for a breakdown or any funny noise from a spindle, the slightest squeak or knock that would bring him rushing over to ease the machinery or make an adjustment, so Anna Pavlovna patrolled her drawing-room, walking over to any group where the talk was too little or too loud, and easing the machinery of conversation back into its proper, steady hum with a single word here or a tiny maneuver there. But busy as she was with all these preoccupations, she was still clearly worried about Pierre. She watched him anxiously as he went over to hear what was being said in Montmartre's circle, and then set off for a different group where the Abbé was holding forth. Pierre had been educated abroad, and this evening party at Anna Pavlovna's was his first such occasion in Russia. Knowing that all the intelligentsia of Petersburg was gathered there, he was like a child in a toy shop, his eyes darting about everywhere. He was afraid of missing any intellectual talk that might have been his to hear. As he gazed at the assembled company, their faces pictures of refinement and self-confidence, he was expecting to hear something very clever at any moment. Eventually, he came over to Morio. The conversation struck him as interesting, so he stood there waiting for a chance to launch forth with his own ideas, as young people are wont to do.